Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out and spending your Monday evening with us. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have Chef Nasim Alikhani and Helen Rosner with us tonight to celebrate the launch of Nasim's debut cookbook, Sofreh. But before we get into all of that, I just have a few logistics to point out for how tonight's event is going to go. We will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of tonight's discussion, so please start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk tonight, Nasim will be signing and personalizing books at the alcove next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. And lastly, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of Sofreh online using the link in the live stream description. All right, let's get into this. This is a cookbook that needs very little introduction. Named after its namesake restaurant, Sofreh brings Nasim's delicious Persian recipes, which she's been cooking and creating and sharing with her community since childhood, to your very own kitchen. Nasim Alikhani has always expressed herself best through food. Coming from a tradition of strong women who are great cooks, she began cooking for large gatherings and parties at a young age. Sofreh, Nasim's Brooklyn restaurant, opened in 2018 to near universal acclaim. It and Nasim have been covered in the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Wall Street Journal, Bon Appetit, Sever, and countless other outlets. As I mentioned earlier, Helen Rosner joins Nasim in conversation tonight. Helen is a staff writer at the New Yorker. She has been covering food for more than a decade as a writer and editor and won a James Beard Award in 2016 for her ode to chicken tenders. Before joining the New Yorker, she was the executive editor of Eater, where she founded the publication's James Beard and National Magazine Award-winning features department. All right, that is all from me. Without any further delay, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Nasim and Helen.
It's so exciting to be up here with you.
Thank you so much. I love your writing.
I love your writing. I think you wanted to start with a little bit of a reading from the book for us, right?
Sure, yeah. Why not? I marked a few things. I want to start off by just something like a prose or a poem from my it's called Baba's Garden. I was in my father's garden when I savored for the first time the butter and creamy crunch of girdu walnuts from the tree that stood majestically in the center, and in the wines that ran from stem to tip of the grapevine leaves. I saw the cracked hands of my grandmother, Khanum, and traced the roots of my story in its wines. I savored the velvety tang of apricots, the tart of white apples, the orange glow of persimmons, the heft of ripened pears and husky mulberries called shatut, the king of berries. They are deeply dark and juicy sweet, and at their feet my father planted rows of gillyflowers and hyacinth that by day offered beauty and by night released an intoxicating fragrance that blanketed the neighborhood. Where is that smell coming from? I heard from a voice that the street whispered. I had woken up and tiptoed to the garden to breathe in as much as I could before morning came. And there their fragrance faded away, and I left again for New York.
I suspect that most of you here have not yet really had the chance to dive into this extraordinary book. And I don't say extraordinarily lightly. It is part of my job to read pretty much every cookbook that comes out, which I can assure all of you can sometimes get to be a little bit of a slog. Every cookbook I think is special and precious in its own way, but this is a really exceptional volume. And the thing that makes it so exceptional, I mean, there are many things. The food is beautiful. The recipes are a perfect combination of approachable and ambitious. But there is a voice to this book, and I'm so glad that you read that poetic, lyrical moment that you chose to read just now, because there's a voice to this cookbook that I think is so rare in cookbooks. And in some ways, this is leading to a question, I promise. But every cookbook speaks directly to its reader, right? That's what a recipe is. It's a series of instructions from the writer to you on the other side of the page. But something that I noticed when I was reading this book, cover to cover, before I even knew that we were doing this event, is that you, throughout the book, you speak directly to the reader in a way that is intimate and almost deeply loving. You call us dear. You invite us in. You exercise invitations and gestures and statements of affection and intimacy, even outside of the recipes. And I'm curious, where did that voice come from? Is that your voice? Did you have to find your writing voice?
I had an incredible co-writer who she's not here, Teresa. She and I spent 2.5 years, 3 years of very intimate relationship. She recorded every word I said and then rewrote them, transcribed, and back and forth we went together. But I think that voice comes from being a mother. I really, really take pride in, I think becoming a mother changed so much in me. And then I realized that I have always been kind of a mother. Like I mothered my brothers, they hated that. I mothered my cousins, they hated that. I even mothered my classmates, and they were like, who do you think you are? And then that continued. But when I really became a mother, I found a joy in combining my heritage, my history, my roots with mothering, and maybe too much mothering. My daughter is sitting here and she's probably rolling her eyes. But all of that lend itself, even with my guests at Sofreh, those of you who are here, like I kind of tell you what to do, like mothers usually, in a kind of loving way most of the time. But that voice is about not telling people what to do. It's just really an intimate conversation. Even writing this book was kind of a gesture to leave something for my kids foremost, because life is busy. They moved on to college and life, and then like at some point I may not be here, and I want to document the only thing I can express myself through, which is through food. Everything else I'm clueless, but food is my language, is my vocabulary. And if I can communicate my roots, as I read about Baba's garden, I grew up in an incredibly loving home, modest but incredibly lucky and filled with food and garden, and as I said, like fruits hanging from everywhere. And I wanted to communicate all that joy with my audience and just give them a glimpse of, not past cannot be replicated, but can be inspiring. And for me, this whole thing, the whole Sofreh, the whole cookbook is about using past as a source of inspiration and almost like a jumpstart what can future bring and what can be. So
For you, did the book begin, thinking about it, writing it, conceptualizing it, did it begin in stories or did it begin in food?
it began in, I had the recipes. I had many, many recipes, simply because I was just thinking about my kids and like what I can leave behind. But so I had about 80 recipes already written. But when the book offer came about, I also journal a lot and I write down a lot. So everything 80%, 90% of what you see is my journaling. And throughout the years, I wrote so much in various parts. It was a nightmare to collect them and to make sense of them, that the moments when I leave Iran, how I feel every time and how I feel every time I enter. When my kids were born, when I was an immigrant student here, everything, it was journaled. So bringing all of that together in a comprehensive way, almost the book was born, almost organically. And it was difficult to make sense of them, how you're going to put this life together, but it wasn't, because all of it was just semi-documented, very badly English written, but it was already documented.
There's a phrase that you use in the book that I found to be such a striking way of describing connecting to one's past, especially when you return after some distance. You describe returning to Iran and going to people's homes and asking them to cook for you and to share recipes and watching your mother cooking. And you refer to this process of learning how other people approach cooking and their food as watering your roots. And I think that's such a beautiful way of connecting to that idea. But it's also the case, and you write about this, that these were their recipes. These were their ways of cooking, their approaches, their stories behind them. I cooked this for so-and-so's wedding, and this is how my son doesn't like the particular way I do the walnut, so I do it this other way. On a certain level, this is a process of documenting other people's stories and their mastery and their ownership of these foods. But now, however many years later, you have a highly acclaimed restaurant. You've written, in my mind, a definitive cookbook. Do you feel like these are yours now, these foods and these recipes?
Yes, they are now, but they were not all mine. And over the years, even my mother's recipe, I have a chicken recipe. I call it Gitty June's chicken, and you all should try it. It's really lovely. This one, I tried so hard to keep it to the way my mother makes it. And it's still, once in a while, she doesn't cook anymore, but I try to give the credit, or there is a dish with eggplant that belongs to a friend of mine. So I really try to stay to the course of what they were to me when I learned them. But then when they eat it, they taste and they say, it's great, but it's a little different than mine. So that's the nature of, I think that's the nature of food. You can't make something authentically if it's not yours. And this is my message to all, like everybody who reads this book. Almost in every recipe, I give readers options, and I push them. Please read this, use it as a structure, but read it and forget about it and do your own thing and bring yourself in, because then that recipe stays with you and becomes your recipe. Because as long as it's just in the book, you do 1 or 2 recipes and you go like, whatever, okay, fine, it's too much work. But once you make it yours, once you insert your event, your ingredients, if it has meat, substitute it with vegetable. If it's vegetable, throw in whatever, turkey or venison for that matter, because I don't like venison. It's a good, no, I'm just saying some people do. But once you make it yours, then it stays with you and it becomes your pantry, and then my job is done. At that point, that's how I see it. And that's how maybe I expect my kids or my loved ones to do. And my mother or my family, whoever taught me anything, they didn't tell me steps. They said a pinch of this and a pinch of that, and that was the recipe. And I'm like, okay, let's figure it out now.
Yeah. I think one of the sort of subtle dangers of a recipe is that it locks something in. Like, even if it's one of those, quote unquote, no recipe recipes, once you write something down, you have said, this is it, this is the thing. And some readers, some cooks might be able to see that and understand that it's a starting place. But many don't. Many feel bound by the recipe, by the written words.
I see it almost in every recipe, that just see this as a guiding. Our Sofreh's wonderful editor, Tom, is here. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Kanaftim. I didn't get a chance to start with how amazingly supportive they were to deal with someone like me. Anybody who works with me is incredibly patient and tolerant and tolerant. But one of the very first question I asked Tom, if you remember, how much I have to be bound to specific recipe direction. I wish I could they kind of limit me and they said, you have to go by this. They gave me a direction to go by. But I tried so hard to insert an idea that this is really just a structure. And it's just a framework for you to start. And that is so important. And you mentioned about roots. I'm always after roots, because roots are everything to start with. Root is foundation. A tree, a plant, everything is a root first, is nourished by a root. But then what happens? There's so much more. The fruits they bear, the environment, and everything else. So I literally brought a grapevine from my Iran, and I planted at Sofreh. It's in the back garden. This is literally physically. I planted my physical roots as well as this book. But that's just the roots. What happens after that, hopefully, it just gives me space to speak to my audience in a very intimate way, and maybe events we can cook together and we throw the recipe and say, let's cook intuitively. You know the recipes. You have an idea what we are going to do. Let's just all go. Let's go for a ride. And that's how I kind of, it scares some of you at Sofreh because you want consistent food every night. But that's how we cook every day at Sofreh. We do have a recipe. We know what we are doing. My team knows what they are doing. And we try to do everything. Sometimes things a little bit go in one direction, and it's surprisingly, some of you should shake your head maybe because you've had like one chicken sauce that was more sour than the previous night. So what? Was thicker than the other night. So some of you laugh because it happens. And I don't hide it. In a way, I take pride in it because we are human and we work in the moment. And I want you to also cook in the moment and enjoy the moment instead of like, oh my God, this Persian recipe, look at the list of ingredients and be timid or intimidated by it.
Something, a sort of buried fact in the book that I was really blown away by was to learn that in Farsi there's no word for a home cook. That there's a word for a professional cook, right? Ashpaz, is that how you say it? But it's intensely gendered. An ashpaz is always a man. A professional cook who works in a hotel or a restaurant or is a caterer. And there is no word for a home cook.
Yeah. In Farsi, there are not a lot of words that are gendered. And I'm so proud of this because it's a language that is actually kind of, you can be genderless, and it's fabulous. It's fascinating. Now we are all pushing to be, get rid of he, she, and all that, but our language naturally has that. But coming back to the word ashpaz, I didn't mention it in the book, but the ashpaz is the word is a very old word for a court cook, the chef. But before that is a very loaded word, like I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of years ago, because the ashpaz were also the medicine men of the court. So it was, and they don't mention it, but many were women. They were medicine women, and they happened to have all those remedies. They still are. You go to some random village and you get sick, your stomach, they send you to an older lady's house and she gives you the remedy. Usually she cooks something for you that is delicious and it also calms your stomach. And so I take a lot of liberty that in my head that all the court cooks, chefs, were female. They were medicine women. They were highly trusted. I don't know that, but I think they were. And they have to be. And that otherwise these elegant, sophisticated, layered dishes would not have been born. But that's my interpretation. Don't use me as a fact.
So what do you think of yourself as? Are you an ashpaz?
I am totally an ashpaz. And more than that, I am a mother. My kids, myself, my nephew, we eat this food every day. So what I'm cooking, my kids eat it, my nephew eats it, my mother eats it. And I would not give anything subpar to my family. So I won't do anything subpar. In the book, I always insist about, even in the book, use the best ingredients because ingredients make the dish. But even if you don't, just go for something simple, but don't do half-ass job. Don't do something that compromise simply because you want to please your guests. It's best if would you give something less than perfect to your kids? Then don't try to impress your guests. Cook something that is cumbersome, but whatever you cook for them, choose a recipe or not, you don't have an ingredient, simplify it, make it easy, but make it wholesome. And that's your job is done as a shpaz and as a mother.
I think the mothering and parenting is such a foundational part, I think, of who you are. I mean, obviously, you've said multiple times now that you're a mother, and you say in the book, you're a mother first, before anything else. And when I told some friends that I was going to be doing this event with you, one of them immediately was like, oh my God, I came to her restaurant with my 5-month-old, and she held her the whole time, and I could actually eat a meal. And, you guys may have seen my husband and baby running out just before this began. The very last meal that I ate before I gave birth, pretty much, was at your restaurant. And I waddled in like an enormous human being and could barely fit in the chairs, and it wasn't supposed to be my last meal before I gave birth, but it ended up I went to the hospital the next day, and you gave my mother your phone number, and you told her to text once the baby was born, and my mother came by the restaurant, and you handed her a container of kachi. And it's a traditional Iranian porridge that's for new mothers. And it was just like, we had never met. We didn't even really say hi. I was just sitting at the restaurant like a giant person. I mean, this is so deep within you. Is it the same thing as cooking? Are they the same thing, or are they in harmony with each other?
It's same thing. It's extension of, think about it. When I gave birth to my twins, I come home depleted, exhausted, in a mess. And my mother comes with this sweet bowl of kachi. To me, it was the best thing in the world. And then after that, when I had Sofreh, accidentally a mother similar to you had twins, came to Sofreh a week later. Maybe Sofreh's food does this magic. She gave birth.
It does something.
A few days later, her husband texts me, and I mentioned it. Oh my God, you have twins? That was a bond. That was an initial. Oh my God, I have twins too. Do you know what's sexy? Yeah, girl and a boy. Oh my God, I had a girl and a boy. So next thing is immediately an idea. My mother gave me this kachi. She doesn't have anybody. Maybe I gave. It was not intentional. I gave her her husband. A few days later, he calls, and guess what? Roxanne is in labor. I'm like, come on over for kachi. But then it gave such a gift to me that I just felt like I want to keep this as a tradition, and I call it Kachi Baby in my phone. There are 27 babies with a munchkin faces just birth, and all I want, they don't have to, but moms send me a picture of.
I think she sent you a picture of me.
Did she?
Yeah.
What should I show you? Yeah, it's there. But it's when you extend. It's life is a circle, in my opinion. Whatever you put in, you give it back. So when you do something like that, it comes back to you in tenfold. And when I'm sitting in the subway and looking through this Kachi Baby's phone, I'm like, my heart is filled with joy. And all I did just created a bowl of, by the way, did you like it?
Okay, so the really tragic thing is I was really sick after the baby was born, and I didn't get to eat it.
Who ate it? Okay,
somebody did. There were a lot of people in the house who were eating, but I couldn't eat anything.
It doesn't matter. It's delicious.
No,
I know it
it's
is.
the most heartbreaking thing. I was hoping you weren't going to ask. And I was like, get away with this. I was like, should I lie? But no, but honestly, and I love my parents, and they are wonderful. They didn't cook for me after the baby was born. They answered the door for a lot of takeout. They cared for me in a million other ways. You were the first person who cooked for me after my baby was born.
It's amazing.
And it was incredibly powerful. I mean, I'm going to cry just now thinking about it. I didn't even get to eat it. It still was the most important thing.
I definitely owe you a kachi. So we just pretend.
We'll just pretend I'm
just pretend the baby was just born, and let's go to a bowl of kachi. Yeah, it's the same act. In our culture, it's giving food is the way. That's how you show love. We have a tradition of making massive pots of food in special religious ceremonies or non, just giving it out to neighbors and knock on doors. I surprised many of my neighbors years ago when we were living in an apartment building, high rise, and I knock on door and with the bowl, and they're like, what's that? And they thought maybe I'm poisoning them. I just felt like cooking a massive pot of something and share it with my neighbors, and I did, but then I slowly cut down because it was just a bit awkward. I had to explain. So, but that's how we show love. That's how we, even a typical, here too, Jewish mothers, Middle Eastern mothers, Indian mothers, all mothers, most. America is different, but it's this culture. I'm not saying it's just all these older culture. Food is a big deal. Food is a scarcity. Food is showing generosity, and America has been a wealth of plenty, so there was no need to share with others what your generosity or your bounty or your heart. But for many cultures, this is the case. Sharing food is sharing love. So sharing kachi and my book, and people eat in my restaurant or holding their babies is all the same.
you came to restaurant life relatively late, relative to how
You don't
old?
want to throw my age? Already New York Times. I was almost 60 when I opened the Sofreh's door. It was a long dream for 25 years. And I set aside that dream when I found out I was pregnant with twins. I was going to have something like Sofreh years ago. But of course, mothering comes first. You can't have twins and then have a restaurant. No way. So I put that in the back burner, kept the dream in my heart, kept working at it. And yeah, it just around, by the time I was 59 and going 60, Sofreh doors open.
Did bringing the food into a restaurant kitchen, paying customers, did it change your relationship to the food?
It was a little awkward in the beginning because I kept going to the chef and kept asking, send this to that table, send this. And he was like, no ticket. He was getting really mad at me, like, where are the tickets? I'm like, this is on the house. And at some point he had to put me straight, like, stop it. This is not, logistically is not possible. I have a business to run. Financially is not doable. But I realized as long as it was a little not easy because I also for years worked in functions that I was donating my food and my time. So it was a lot of adjustment. But I quickly realized as long as I give everything I have and I do the best I can, I'm square, I'm fine. I can do this. I can see it as business, and occasionally I do something that it brings joy to them and to me. But it's just a little bit of adjustment in the beginning that quickly subsided. It's a business after all. I have to run a business.
It was so interesting. So in the cookbook, there's a recipe for chicken with prune sauce,
Yeah.
which you write about as the stew. There's the stew version, which you write about as something that you made for your children, that is just in so many ways like the foundational dish that you cook for your family. And then it appears again in the book in a different form in the last chapter, which is recipes from the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how it evolved from one form to the other?
This chicken has prunes. The prunes have dried prunes from Iran. They're delicious. I even actually was thinking originally, I'm going to import all the prunes, not understanding what it takes. Very naive, very naive. But these prunes have pits. And when we opened the door, the very first night for family and friends, I served them with pits. And the chef, who was a real restaurateur, was helping me, and he said, this is really liability. It's dangerous. What are you doing? I'm like serving chicken dishes with actual. I said, it's okay. Servers can explain that. Be careful with the pits. And he said, no, all it takes one broken teeth, you're screwed. And then I realized that for the first time that restaurant food needs some modification. So a lot of modifications. So I realized those prune situation from Iran is not happening. So I had to come settle for American prunes. They're not as good, but they don't have pits. And if I modify and tweak, more saffron, more lemon, I can get them to original part. And then puree the sauce, because the American prunes, they're black. The sauce is red. Imagine a piece of black thing in your sauce. It's just not appealing. So I had to work around it, make it visually pleasing. Taste is as close as what it should be, and safe for people to eat without breaking a teeth. So yeah, it was some of that stuff I had to go through to change the recipes. But I really encourage you, if you make this chicken in the recipe, in the book, Google Persian prune, and your life will be transformed. Just make sure to tell your guests that there are pits inside.
One of the things that I really loved about the book itself is how generous you are about the idea of failure. I think it's rare in a cookbook, especially one that is this refined, one that is not specifically like a cookbook for beginners, You talk about how it's okay if you try to make a tadig and it
burns.
It burns. And you say, actually, it's not just okay, it's great.
You call it a smoked rice. Seriously, it has happened to me in my events. And when you anyway, it happens. Cooking, just like life, shit happens. And then you just look at it and say, let me reward it, shape it, reframe it, and introduce it with pride, or acknowledge, hey guys, I burned your fries today, and so what? Next time is my first time or my second time. Or even me, I have cooked hundreds and hundreds of thousands of rice over the course of 50 years of my life. You know how many of them have been burned? God, countless. Even at Sofreh, one night we didn't have tadik because they burned. And the chef's like, we're not going to serve it. I'm like, keep it. We don't charge. We offer it. We tell guests, hey, we burned your tadik. It's on the house. And everybody was so happy. I'm like, they're not actually burned and they're still yummy. So what?
I find this such a liberating way of thinking about things. I mean, I cook a lot, and I think I'm a decent cook, but for reasons I cannot quite predict, like I feel like I should start tracking this and see if it connects to the phases of the moon or something. Sometimes just everything goes wrong, and I find it so profoundly anxiety creating. And you know, you at one point in the book, you list out all of the things you can do with your rice if your rice gets screwed up, right? Like use it to thicken a soup, feed it to the birds, like whatever it is that you need to do.
Make a meatball with it.
Make a meatball with it. Like there is nothing that is actually irredeemable. There's nothing that is actually truly without value.
Except you start with the poor quality of something. Like if you have a bad fish, God forbid, or an old something. That's irredeemable and one should not eat it. But anything that goes wrong in this whole thing, which in the course of even restaurant life, especially in the course of restaurant life, so many things goes wrong. As long as what you start with is fine, look at it, take a deep breath. If it's runny, add flour. If it's too thick, add water. If it's burned, find a way to rectify it. If it's under seasoned, more salt. If it's over seasoned, there are tricks in the book I say, especially with your rice. Put like a whole wheat bread, it soaks up all this. Anyway, it's so much you can do. And at the worst scenario, if it's not working for that night, call a pizza. Look at your food the next day. See what I can do with this leftovers, because it's nothing for me more criminal than just throwing away perfectly something that could be something else could be done with it. And hopefully the book gives some of that. But I just want people to just be relaxed about cooking. It's joy. The reason I think I love it so much, if I was so tied up about it, I wouldn't be in this business. Starting something, food is magic. Why is magic? It's really magic. Potion, when you make potion, you start with some elements, you end up having something else. And cooking is the same exact thing. You start with some random stuff, and then the end result is magic. So take care of that magic. Find a creative way of do something with it. There's always something you can do. And take a joy and liberty in that. And yeah, come and tell your guests that, hey, I screwed up this time and tomorrow will be better. Or no, just enjoy this as is. Let's just have more cocktail and forget about it.
I think this sort of generous attitude probably, I mean, certainly serves you incredibly well in your capacity as both a restaurateur and as a cook and a cookbook author. You write in the book that that your restaurant has to speak to both Iranians and to people who are not familiar with Iranian food and culture. And the same can absolutely be said for this book, which I think you do a really delicate job of writing this book, both for people who are familiar with Iranian cuisine and history and culture, and for people who might be new for it. What is it like to fill both of those roles at the same time, to be an ambassador and a mirror?
I hope I am. I'm not sure. I mean, I really try hard to be the voice that part of me talks about tradition, roots, foundation, structure. But part of me also have been here for 40 years. I am as American as many of you because I'm older than some of you. So I lived here as long as some of you lived. So, and I have been consumer of these amazing food culture in New York, like experiencing this incredible variety. So I have food in both worlds, and I just want to communicate that. I hate the word modern tradition, but I'm really believing in tradition as a foundation, but also I believe in forward looking. I believe in tomorrow. I believe in learning from every culture. At night when I'm home and for my downtime, I'm looking at all these chefs and what others do. You learn from every one of them. So if my book and my restaurant does not deliver this need, then I become old in a way and kind of redundant, and the book becomes old and it loses its purpose. Part of what I try to do with this recipe, there is a recipe, is a osh. Osh is a category of Iranian food that I think only we have it, and I chose to give it a big section because ton of ingredients in one bowl. You can do it in one pot. There is one, it says everything but kitchen sink. It's just like such a 3 pages of items to make. And my husband was like, why are you putting this? Who's going to make it? I said, those who really want to do something so foundational, but also take it their own. But they have to, in order, they have to look at this and they go like, they don't get intimidated by 3 pages of ingredients and instruction, but they look at it, make it, feed a group of people, take pride in laboring 2 days on making it and announcing it. It's not for everybody, but there is always something for somebody who wants to take that route. And I want to put that down as almost testimony of this is my contribution to an old cuisine. What people do with it, God, I hope one day I hear like a version of it, or some of you make it, hopefully you make it and you just say, wow, I omit this, I added this, I increased that, and something new is born. And I think that's my job. At that point, I think I've done a good job being in both worlds.
That's amazing. And that's, I think, the perfect place for us to wrap up the part where I ask the questions and turn it over to the rest of you. I think we have time for a handful of questions, right? So hands in the air, folks. You have to. I mean, I have tons more. I can keep carrying this if you needed to, but yes.
I had a question about products.
Sorry, could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, I just had a question about products.
Okay.
Because when you cook your food in a foreign country, the first problem usually is just finding the products, or at least the same products. Like, how did you navigate the difficulty of products? Like, did you come up with alternatives? Did you have to give up on some ingredients? Like, what was your...
We have Amazon. That's one thing. But aside from having Amazon, years ago, my mother's suitcase. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, there are some difficulties with few things. But nowadays, world is global, so you can get everything everywhere. That doesn't mean you get with the same freshness and same quality. However, foods like us, like the book what I've written, you don't need to think about products. You just have to think about onion, turmeric, garlic, ginger. You're good to go. And some prunes and some, you don't have prunes, use cherry. You don't have cherries, use peaches. It just this open arm that you don't need ton of things. When I was student and really on a budget, really, I know how to cook on a budget, and not having access to anything, and it was not now, it was 38 years ago, rice was different. It was Uncle Ben, and I was shocked how much I cook it. This thing doesn't change, and it looks the same. And I was like, one day I'm going to cook it like for 2 hours and see what happens to it. And I was shocked by that. So let me see how I can turn this Uncle Ben's to something that resembles what I had. Quickly, I realized that there is an Indian market you can just get. But until then, you just learn as a cook by how to navigate. And it's actually fun because it allows your creativity not to be bound by what it should be. Open your pantry and see what you can do. Nowadays, you can turn something looking like rice with cauliflower. I mean, who would have thought? Let's just do that now. Why not? Yeah.
I was curious. So you opened your restaurant 20 years after you initially wanted to, I think?
25. 25.
How did the dream not die? Like 25 years later, and twins and life, how did you have the energy to do it?
I don't know, honestly, but I knew that it just became something part of, like, you keep repeating yourself to everybody. And after a while, you don't have a space to back down because everybody's like, but there were moments that when most people retire and I'm starting something crazy like entering a restaurant business. During those times that it was just so hard and things weren't moving to the direction I wanted. And there were one time that I just really like, screw it, let's just done. I'm done with the permits, legality, logistics. But then the thought of not doing it was so scary that I just had no choice but do it, and I was ready to fail. When you're ready to fail, there is no stop. How bad can it be? You're ready to land on your face. How bad can it be? And I didn't fail, and I shocked myself. And we were just gonna open for 40 people because I had no experience of feeding the full restaurant. And we ran out of food the first night because restaurant got filled. And the second night we said, okay, we open another 10 seats. Again, we ran out of food. So yeah, I was shocked, like the food, the people. And I started taking pictures of empty place that there's not a grain of salt left because I couldn't believe that people love it so much. So yeah, it was shock to me as well. But again, when you have nothing to lose and you persevere, I think universe has a way of giving you back.
Hi,
You
Nasim.
familiar face. Hi.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So after 5 years of such a successful run, are there expansion plans for Sofreh?
Yes, not for Sofreh. Sofreh will be that. But I am opening a cafe very close to Sofreh because before Sofreh and all that hoopla and press and reservations and all that, I was going to have a small cafe. And I want all of you to experience like the joy of cafe in Iran. You sit, you linger, you just have a bite and you keep going all day. So I want to do that. And yes.
Where's it going to be? Do you have a location?
Yes, we do, on Flatbush, and what's the address? Anyway, very close to, my husband knows the address. What is
This
that?
great news.
Bergen and Flatbush.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
I think this last question, right? I think we're at time. So
Okay, I'll make it a good one.
yeah,
Sure.
finish strong.
I think I saw in the book that in Iran you're not supposed to help if you're a guest
Yeah.
cooking. So I wonder, do you prefer to cook alone?
Oh, absolutely. Not only that, my kitchen in the house has a line. I wish I could take a picture of it. Has a line, like the whole house is in wood. The kitchen has a section in tiles. And when guests come, I'm like, you don't cross. Just do not cross. You don't get up, you don't try to help because you create more trouble. So just stay, you're in my house. But that's kind of a joke, but it isn't. It's rude. It is rude. You're guests. You're supposed to be, like I'm a host, I know my place as a guest. Your place is to be taken care of. And you allow me to do my work, and you should do your work. So just, yeah.
I think that was a perfect note to end on. Nasim, thank you, and congratulations on this absolutely wonderful book. It's
Thank you so
great.
much.
It's-
I didn't give enough credit to the team behind this book. It was a huge job. We made it so simple. I had the recipes, I had the stories, but the role of Tom and my co-writer and another editor, Peter is not here, it was huge. I think we gave you thousands of pages. How much we gave? I don't know what. Lots of pages. And they navigate through and they made it make sense. They made it beautiful. They made it poetic. And I can't thank you all enough. And you, Sarah, as well, for just supporting. It's just been amazing working with them. And I had to say that. Thank you all for being here. It's incredible. I never believed I could do this. Just sit here. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming out to celebrate this launch for us. Thank you, Helen, for moderating such a wonderful conversation. And thank you again to Nasim for being here with us to celebrate. So just a few quick reminders before we wrap up. If you're still with us on the YouTube live stream, you can buy a copy of Sofreh by clicking the link in the live stream description. For those of you with us tonight, I know many of you picked up a book when you checked in, but if you didn't, we have plenty of additional copies available for purchase. If you already got one, might as well show some love for your friends and family and buy another. Signed copies of cookbooks are always the perfect gift. Nasim will be signing and personalizing your books. That's going to happen right next to where my coworker Alexa is standing and pointing to. It's a little bit hidden, so it'll all make sense in a moment. We just ask that you all line up down the center aisle and curve around to the wall, and please make sure you grab all of your personal belongings with you so that we can start to break down and rearrange the space. I think that's all. Thank you all so much for coming out. Let's give these two one last round of applause.